do nicely. Through mid-wicket, England job. Carlos Brathwaite! Carlos Brathwaite!
And he wants to finish it, and he might have done it as well. 5 times 50 over England World Cup champion.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to this week's episode of the Road to the Cup Finals, T20 World Cup 2024. The biggest player this week has probably been the rain, but we have a few interesting games to talk about, right, PG? Sorry, I didn't give you your big intro that I normally give.
It's fine. The people know who I am at this point.
Well, it's BG, guys. Surprise, surprise. Professor BG. Professor BG.
Put some respect on that.
You'll have me calling him doctor soon enough. But I thought we'd start off, so last week, interesting, initial group stages, a lot of non-associate, a lot of established teams, countries with great cricketing legacies, in a way, not sure of a place in the Super 8s, right? We're talking about Pakistan, England, and New Zealand. A lot of those storylines have concluded this week. So I think let's just dive in, right?
Absolutely.
Let's just go into the first game that happened on Monday. So this was South Africa, Bangladesh, right? How do you think that turned out?
I think South Africa has been one of the more entertaining sides, or let me put it this way, not necessarily South Africa, but matches featuring South Africa have been really entertaining this tournament. And this match delivered 100%. So South Africa, I believe, were put into bat. And in 20 overs, they put up a fairly paltry total of 113 for 6. Again, it's been a funny tournament, so you would have given them a fighter's chance, right? Purely because we've seen a lot of these totals being defended this tournament.
And it was in the bit of a devil's playground of a pitch.
Oh my God.
The
Nassau County pitch. Where do we even start with that pitch? But I think we've touched upon it. This pitch has
You've gotten a close look.
I've gotten a close look, as we will talk about a little later. But I think even in the matches that we've all been focusing on in this stadium, it's clear that it is definitely not a batter's paradise. You kind of need to really work for your runs, and this match didn't prove anything else, right? 113 for 6 in 20 overs. Competitive total, but Bangladesh probably would have been really happy with that. They would have taken it 100%. Definitely had a chance. They did lose a couple of early wickets. South Africa bowling has been very impressive this tournament, and that's the reason why they are where they are. So the Bangladesh lost early wickets, and next thing you know, Mahmudullah and Tauhid Hridoy, they entered the crease and they stitched together a very useful partnership, and it was looking a little dicey for South Africa until a certain incident in the 17th over, which ultimately proved decisive. Do you want to touch upon that?
Yeah, so in the 17th over, I believe it was Mahmudullah on strikes, and there was an LBW shout. That should not have been by any means given. It definitely looked like it was missing the stumps, but the umpire gives it out, and so the rules are that as soon as the umpire gives a decision, a dismissal decision, I believe, the ball is considered dead from that point on, right? And in this case, the ball hits Mahmudullah's pads and runs down to the boundary for 4, but he was given out before the ball, actually went to the boundary. I don't think that doesn't really matter though, right? Like,
Shouldn't matter. It's obviously a bit of a contentious call because you will not believe it. They ended up losing by 4 runs. And so it makes you wonder, right? The fact that he was given not out, yet the umpire deemed the ball to be a dead ball. They were deprived of 4 runs in the process, and that turned out to be the margin of victory for the South Africans. Bangladesh weren't quite able to see it through in the very end. I think they needed 11 of the last over, and Keshav Maharaj was the one bowling. Bowled a couple of good balls in the over, but he also bowled a couple of gimme balls, which truth be told, should have been deposited into the crowd. There were 3 wickets actually, I think, that fell that over. Or I think, 3 wickets. Two actually that fell. But the crucial one was in Mahmudullah. Bangladesh would have thought they had a chance with Mahmudullah at the crease there. Maharaj bowls a full toss. Juicy full toss at that. Mahmudullah creams it down the ground, and Aiden Markram takes a great catch just in front of the boundary. A little bit more distance, and would have been a different result altogether. But the obvious talking point was the leg by scandal, which turned out to eventually be the margin of victory for the South Africans. So sucks if you're a Bangladesh fan, but it's nice to see South Africa on the right side of certain close games.
Yeah, BG, huge fan of South Africa, if you haven't already gauged. But yeah, they've squeezed through a bunch of victories, and just to kind of hit home a little bit further on that particular rule, right? So I think a lot of people talk about why it doesn't make sense, right? Like the sequences that follow the dismissal, especially if it's not out, should be considered. But I think it's worthwhile looking at why it does make sense, right? Like why it came into being initially, and I think one of the reasons is that because of how the game was played until the advent of DRS, once something is given out, play stops, right? And the fielding team is not alert, and then it's like someone could steal a run, but if it's out, then that doesn't count, right? So I feel like it's an extension of the pre-DRS kind of reign, and I guess it makes sense, but it probably has to be revisited, right? Like I think the rule should be that you have to go through the entire sequence of actions no matter what, and then based on the review, it can be adjudged either way. I think that's kind of straightforward, but is that what your consensus is as well, or do you have any other sort of views on that?
I get where you're coming from, and just in terms of sort of the overall discourse around this, saying, I think it's just a natural extension of what the rule was pre-DRS, and unfortunately, I think we're in a situation right now where there are certain nuances or certain edge cases that we continue to see sort of come to the fore as different matches tend to are getting played at this moment in time. And so I really think I feel that they were hard done by, because I really think they should have gotten the 4 runs, because I feel like Bangladesh were really hard done by, and I really think the rule deserves revisiting moving forward.
Yeah, I think there's it makes sense why it was created that way, and it's hard to foresee, like you said, these edge cases. Another one that comes to mind for me is and this one I think could have more sort of split views, when the fielding team appeals for stumpings, and the ball just kind of goes past the bat and they appeal for stumpings, and the entire process is reviewed. They look at Snicko, they look at a lot of things. I mean, I just feel like it's used very strategically sometimes, even when it looks like the batsman's completely in. I think maybe fielding teams need to specify what they are reviewing.
What they're reviewing.
I don't know, could go a lot of different ways, but I think this is, in my opinion, cricket has done pretty well with the technology so far.
But there maybe you could argue, I don't know, a lot's going against the bowling team anyway in terms of the pitches we're seeing, so might as well give them a little bit of leeway in places where you possibly could. But I don't know, it's just one of those things.
South Africa fan coming in strong here, guys.
So it's not what you think. Trust me, it's not what you think.
Okay, so moving on from that,
we have next.
The next game was played between Canada and Pakistan. Pakistan fighting for their, their place in the Super 8s. And, guess what? Pakistan did not choke. That was, I think that's the main story. It was another one of the games at, the New York Stadium, Nassau County, pretty low scoring. Canada was batting first and were put in a score of about 106 in the 20 overs, which we know, as we've seen so far, isn't the worst score. It has been defended. And Pakistan chased it pretty comfortably. The main sort of protagonists coming forward are the usual suspects, Rizwan and Babar, get good scores. And they, do the job. They needed to do the job to keep them, in the hunt. And I think that's all that's there to be said about that one.
How many times have we said that? It's not so as cursory as saying Pakistan did the job, because they rarely do the job. So admittedly, it was Canada, but fine, we'll give them credit for what it's worth.
Yeah. Canada did score about 190 against the US.
Yeah,
And, so I guess they had
Take
some...
your praise, Pakistan. Take your praise.
Maybe the praise here is more for Canada.
Yeah,
We
true.
expected
But I
that.
don't like backhanded compliments here.
And Sri Lanka Nepal was the main victor, like I mentioned, was rain in this one.
I feel like that happened a fair bit this week. Pretty frustrating, must say.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about that briefly. So there was a lot of talk about how rain has played such a huge part and how we've advanced a lot in cricket in terms of, like we talked about, technology and things like that. But why hasn't the technology to keep grounds dry and things like that evolved a little more? Because a lot of times, and the reason I'm saying this is that if it's raining, I don't think cricket is a game that can be played while it's raining. Right?
Absolutely.
There's no way. And if there's the infrastructure to cover the stadiums, that's one option. And cricket could be played, and we've seen some stadiums around the world that do have that. But oftentimes, games are called off because the outfield is wet. Not the pitch, not the run-up, just the outfield, right? And because it's dangerous for spinners, for fielders, right? Like they could get injured. And that's a valid concern. But like in grounds, and this was pointed out by... Sunny G and like a couple of analysts over the India-Canada game that also got washed out, which is a crucial one, and we'll get to that. But it talked about how at like grounds like the Eden Gardens and stuff, there's no advanced technology, but there are covers for the entire pitch. Right? And that doesn't seem like a lot. Like you need like the volunteering kind of manpower there, but it's besides that, it's just the same sort of covers that needs to be extended everywhere. I just thought that was interesting.
No, that's a good point. I think all I will say about it is I agree with you. And two, I think they need to take a lesson from the RCB ground. Yeah, the Chinnaswamy has one of the best Super Soaker systems out there. The outfield gets dry in a matter of minutes, which is why, although inevitably it does tend to rain a lot when the IPL is held in Bangalore in particular, we generally do a very good job of ensuring that the field is, a good playing condition very quickly. So maybe that's something to think about for all the grounds out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like the ICC, I mean, of course, this is like a new sort of country where cricket is being played now, but there could be certain, standards that have to be met right before. And I feel like this is not a sort of technological, infrastructural huge change. It could just be, get the volunteers to do that. Because it's unfortunate, right? It's unfortunate that we'll see a lot of teams, their fates have literally been dictated by, something just
dies and washes out like washouts like that.
Yeah, so, and I feel about this because I'm talking about Pakistan here as well. This is
shit's gone wrong.
Shit's gone wrong. Like I'm on Pakistan's side here. Anyway, let's move on to the next game. So it was Namibia playing Australia. I don't think there was any sort of consequences here per se in the larger picture, right? It was basically
wooden spoon against tabletoppers almost, right? So I think Namibia, 72 all out. Again, it was always going to be really tough for them against Australia, but I think it's a victory for them just in terms of the exposure they've gotten to some of the best international sides out there. It's a credit to them in that sense. Gerhard Erasmus with the fighting knock of 36 or 43, the captain of Namibia, didn't really get the support he needed to kind of get them over at least the 100 run mark to make this somewhat competitive. I always knew it was most likely going to be Australia who came out of this victors, and it proved to be the same. Australia getting home in just 5.4 overs, quick fire 34 off 17 with Travis Head, David Warner as well with the fireworks early on, and Mitchell Marsh kind of came around and applied the finishing touches. So professional, thorough performance by the Aussies. Expect anything less of them in when you say it's a World Cup? Absolutely not. So they romped home pretty comfortably.
Yeah, pretty flawless. And Adam Zampa, bowled a really good spell, cleaning up the bottom of the Namibia order. And I think the reason I mentioned that is because I think the role that spin's going to play, right? Like they need some of their spinners being in form, and we'll see it with Zampa and we'll see it with Ashton Agar. Again, not against a very good team, but he did do well. So the next game that took place was a big one in a way. BG, our man here, made a visit to
the Nassau Cricket Ground
here in New York. It was the United States taking on the India game. You know what? I think you should take this away.
What can I say? So it was an early start as well. It takes a while to get to that ground, by the way. So and conditions were fairly hot and humid. So I'd imagine it would have been fairly tough out there. So got to the ground, and the USA were put into bat. We've obviously talked about the challenges at that ground, and Arshdeep Singh really got things going. The first ball of the match, he got a wicket. It was hard from my angle, by the way, because I got a side-on view of the action, and I didn't even register what happened the first ball. Like the next thing you know, they're all up in unison in appeal, and he's been given. So great start by him. He got 2 wickets pretty early, and the US were kind of on the back foot after that. They had a bit of a partnership in the middle with Stephen Taylor and Aaron Jones, getting a couple. Aaron Jones got 11, but he was out there for a while, and Stephen Taylor played a couple of good shots in his knock of 24. And then Nitish Kumar came towards the end, and a few lusty blows kind of got them to what was a very competitive total of 110. And I felt like, given the atmosphere around, everyone did kind of feel that it was going to be competitive, even though we're talking about the powerhouse that India is. So India come out to bat. Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli open the batting. And a man that's been spoken about a lot when it comes to the USA, Saurabh Netravalkar, nicks off Virat Kohli first ball. And not what the Indian contingent expected to see and obviously wanted to see, but it was a great ball, and I think it definitely deserved a wicket. Rishabh Pant comes into the fore, and he gets Rohit Sharma out as well. Saurabh Netravalkar got him top edging to mid off. And so at that point, you're like, okay, it's a little bit interesting here. A little bit of a dicey situation we find ourselves in here. And then we lose Rishabh Pant a little after that. And at this point, it was probably 65-35 maybe in India's favor. And Shivam Dubey did look scratchy for a while. So he joined Surya Kumar Yadav at the crease, and he wasn't able to time the ball at all. He was getting it on the body a lot, and it was really starting to look a little ominous for the Indian contingent until Surya Kumar Sky was able to get off a couple of good shots to the leg side, played some lovely scoops that we're getting accustomed to seeing in T20 format. And one of the talking points which really eased the pressure on India's chase was a 5-run penalty that was awarded to to India as a result of the US being warned twice already of taking more than 60 seconds to start the immediate next over. And so the rule has it that if you do this 3 times in a T20 innings, and it's been insane in the T20 game now, then the opposing team gets a penalty the opposing team gets awarded 5 runs. So the US unfortunately didn't adhere to that, and as a result of that, it made our chase a lot easier. I'm probably talking too much, but I was at the match, so I really, enjoyed sort of the atmosphere, and I enjoyed sort of how cricket's become a lot more popular. You kind of see like the fans around you, and there were a lot of Americans at the game as well, who really were felt like honored and privileged to be a part of that setup itself. So cricket won because, and by the way, this is the last match that was going to be played at the Nassau Cricket Ground because they're going to demolish it now. So definitely did its job in terms of throwing up some absolute crackers. But India romped home in the end.
That Pakistan USA game will live in memory for a long time.
Yes.
But like quick word on the 5-run penalty, right? Like, so like you said, 60 seconds between overs, and obviously for a team that doesn't have a lot of experience, it's forgivable, right? And I think they've also taken it in their stride. But just to sort of answer any questions that have been there about Jayasha's script or things going according to plan, because let's be real, that's definitely been a part of this discussion. Curious to see how that happened. For the first time with the USA.
What are the odds?
What are the odds of them playing, India, and it happening at such a crucial moment? Because this was a crucial moment. Like, I remember watching the telly. I couldn't quite make it to the ground like BG did, but it was about 35 runs to win of 30 balls, and I'm like, I saw that. I was 100% sure that that's what the equation was, and I blinked, and the next thing I see, it was 30 of 30, and I'm like, how did that? Wait, what? Like, what happened? Like, I couldn't make sense of what happened. And then, obviously, the commentators talked about it. But the thing is that the rule has not come about this World Cup, right? Like, the USA coach, I forget his name, but, like, he talked about how it's been introduced in their series with Bangladesh prior and their series also with Canada. And they've been warned before. Okay, so all the USA fans here are probably non-existent, but like, if you're out there, it wasn't stolen. This is a legitimate rule, and it's unfortunate that it happened in this game.
It's a shame it happened against India, but I will also touch on the one point that Pranav added, which was actually quite funny live as well. To his point of kind of the scorecard that they were maintaining, the scoreboard they were maintaining in the stadium. So I don't think a lot of people were necessarily looking at it. They were kind of soaking in the cricket, but then at some point when the chase was getting a lot closer, every time we kept looking at the scoreboard, I don't think the people who were operating the scoreboard knew how to like manually input 5 runs. So that equation kept changing every couple of seconds, and people were perplexed. No one quite knew what was happening, and so it was just it was 2-3 minutes of utter chaos. But then eventually it corrected itself, and I think the equation became a lot easier for India. And I guess that those experienced heads really rose to the occasion.
Yeah, absolutely. India also did win in the second last over, so it wasn't a South Africa Bangladesh situation. This was a more convincing win, but you have to say good fight by the US team, right? And actually, commendable performance from them in the group stages so far, and I hope they can shake something up in the Super 8s as well. Moving on to the West Indies New Zealand game, and New Zealand needed this win. New Zealand was they lost to Afghanistan. They're coming in playing another big game here against West Indies, and they did pretty well, right? Trent Bolt did what he normally does. I believe it was Brandon King that he got bowled in the first over. I don't know. I was going to say Bobby King for some reason. BB King. It's all the same. But yeah, Trent Bolt did that. He didn't do that to Brandon King. Actually, Johnston Charles. New Zealand got a lot of quick wickets. Jimmy Neesham, Southee, Lockie Ferguson knocked over a lot of top order. Brendan King also did get out. Nicholas Pura and Roston Chase. Robin Powell went early. And then we had Sherfane Rutherford, who basically came in and just started taking everyone to the cleaners. A lot of like lusty blows. And I think this is the thing that's scary about West Indies, right? Like they don't really need a single person to it's not a lineup that's dependent on the collective. Yeah. It's like send this one guy out, like Nicky B can change a game.
He can go absolutely berserk. They can go berserk on any day, and we've seen them do this before in T20 World Cups, right? So
it's this is a team that's absolutely geared to this format, and not in the way that some of the associates and Afghanistan are well suited to it. They just have the big hitters. They have the mercenaries that go along all the leagues of the world, right? Domestic leagues of the world.
Which is unbelievable.
There's so much.
Look at that. Andre Russell in at 8. Oh, jeez.
Yeah. Andre Russell came after Akil Hussain.
Ridiculous.
And then they had Romario Shepherd, who also hits the ball a long way.
He can send the ball a fair bit. I mean, that's ridiculous. Still, look at that depth. And this is arguably without some of their other world-class T20 players that we've gotten accustomed to over the years.
Yeah.
So incredible stuff.
So West Indies get off to, I mean, with contributions, especially from Rutherford, get to a pretty good score. Actually, maybe like an average score, you'd say. Right?
Average, just slightly under par.
Under par, 149 in their 20. And you're thinking, that they've salvaged something for this game. They have a like a total to bowl at. But how did New Zealand's innings go?
New Zealand. So I think one of the New Zealand's batting truly hasn't gotten going this tournament. Yes, sure, their matches haven't really extended all. I mean, Afghanistan bowled them out for 75, so you could say that was a disaster. And then the other game they played, they basically won in like 4 overs or something, 4 or 5 overs or 7. I don't even remember what it was, but it was easy. My point is, so they haven't really been exposed to like a challenging chase or like a challenging, setting a first innings total sort of effort, right? So anyway, in response to the 149 posted by the West Indies, New Zealand lost early wickets here as well. Devon Conway was dismissed early, Rachin Ravindra as well, and then Kane Williamson. They were all quickly dismissed. Have to call out Goodkesh. I keep getting his name. Goodkesh Modi. He bowled really well. He's the spinner. He's the left arm spinner. So I think Kane Williamson was the big wicket there, and he's had a lean World Cup. Till as of right now. So and then Darryl Mitchell, by the way, was bowled by an absolute beauty by Modi as well. He kind of bowled a spinner that kind of looked like it was coming in with the angle, and then it just turned away slightly, went for a boom, expansive drive, and then he was beaten all ends up. Beauty for any spinner. So, things were not looking great then, and so they just consistently kept losing wickets. A couple of lusty blows from Glenn Phillips really kind of kept them in it. They had a fighter's chance, but ultimately that was put to rest very quickly by the West Indian bowlers. It was a great combined bowling effort from them. Alzari Joseph, by the way, picked up 4 wickets.
Yes.
We haven't seen that for the RCB, but again, let's not make this more RCB.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, it's a disease.
2 games, 3 games he played for RCB.
RCB was atrocious. And then these grounds are not that much bigger, mind you, and then he goes and picks up 4 wickets. I mean, what is it about RCB? Yeah. Anyway, we've seen this argument way too many times, but
we don't mean to bore you.
We don't need to bore you, but good victory by the West Indies.
Good victory for the West Indies, and it was not looking great for New Zealand even at that point.
Yes.
And so let's move on to the next one, which was Bangladesh Netherlands. This was actually an important one for Bangladesh. They had a close shave with South Africa, as we talked about earlier. Had to win this. They were already in second, I believe, but had to create some distance from the pack. And this was actually, in a way, an interesting game. Bangladesh ended up getting, we won't go into it in too much detail. Shakib, I believe, played a really good innings here from the good old days. Smacked a few around, had his big lusty slog sweeps and everything. It was classic Shakib, got them to a pretty good total, 159 for 5. And in the chase, Netherlands weren't doing so bad. In fact, they were doing pretty damn well, and at one point needed about 50 runs to get from 6 overs. And here came a new name in the Bangladesh setup, Rashad Hussain, who is a leg spinner, one that kind of bowler that we haven't seen come out of Bangladesh as often. And he's only, I believe, 21 years of age, coming into this Bangladesh team for this huge World Cup, and has made a bit of a mark. So after they needed 50 of 36, he bowls a brilliant over, getting 2 wickets. I believe he gets out Siebrand Engelbrecht, who, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but he got, he played the fighting knock in the previous game, and he also gets Bass D-lead. I don't know what the magnitude of that wicket was, but he was a top order batsman, so I think it was important enough given the situation.
I expected you to know Netherlands cricket was like the back of your hand. Yourself.
Yeah, I mean, Netherlands is kind of my South Africa, so I probably should have. But Rashad Hussain bowled that brilliant over. That turned the tides, and he also goes and picks up another wicket towards the end. A lot of hype around this guy, and I read this interesting stat about the top 10 wicket takers in Bangladesh, I think across all formats, 6 of them are spinners. And none of them are like wrist spinners.
That is interesting.
Yeah, so they, like, being a subcontinent team, and I think Pakistan also kind of faces this issue, right? Like, they haven't had the best spinners in their lineup for a while, like no one really making, it's mostly like the fast bowlers. Bangladesh also, they have had spinners, but mostly finger spinners, left arm spinners. You know, we've seen Shakib for ages. Mohammad Rafiq, he's definitely up there. Mehdi Al Hassan has been a more recent one who's done great. But yeah, you know, excited to see our young prospects. I'm a huge fan of the craft, as you know, BG.
Yes.
I don't know about you guys. But yeah, like, that's great news for Bangladesh, and also very good news for them in terms of making it out of that group. The next game was an important game again for England, taking on my old hometown in Oman, back from way back in the day. And England, God, it was a challenging little game for them, right?
How much did Oman hit in the first innings?
So Oman were bundled out for 47. And it's like, you know, the funny thing is, like, we talked about the Australia-Namibia game, and like, it's just the rivalry between these teams in a way creates such an interesting sort of storyline. And then Australia chases that 72 in eight or 9 overs, right? Yeah. Or was it less? Seven overs. Yeah. And that was like, one of the biggest sort of margins of victory and whatnot. And England goes on, they're like, okay, no, we're not letting you get away with that so easy. Bowls out Oman for 47.
3 overs.
And chased it down in 3 overs.
It's remarkable.
I think that's the fastest.
Must be the fastest chase ever.
That's
3 overs, guys. Let that sink in. They hit 50 for 2 in 3.1 overs. I mean, we haven't seen that before. Again, admittedly, the point here is to emphasize on how good England were and how clinical they were. I mean, I think we've spoken about this and we've kind of touched upon it. It's honestly great exposure for a lot of these affiliate nations at this point. They obviously haven't played cricketers of this quality. And so, you know, whatever experience they kind of get out of it is a win for them. And we really hope to see these teams play, you know, the big teams a lot more, and hopefully get to a point where these matches are a lot more competitive. We've seen this kind of arc with teams like Afghanistan. You know, they played, you know, 50 over format. They've played formats previously where they were absolutely dismantled, and now it's got to a point where they're regularly, you know, competing with the best teams, and they've actually gotten a few wins under their belt. So it's all about exposure. Don't want to go into how Oman were miserable. I think it was expected. I think the fact that England did in 3 overs is kind of the main story to take out of it, not the fact that, you know, Oman were as bad as they were. So, you know, hope to see, you know, them improve, you know, over time. So let's see how that goes.
Definitely. There has been some talk about, how many sort of affiliate associate nations should be in the World Cup at this stage, right? And yeah, I completely agree. I think, like, somebody made this comment somewhere. I don't know if it was Twitter, and if you happen to be watching, do claim it. But they were talking about how Sri Lanka was in the 1975 World Cup, and they were minnows at that point, played 3 games and got hammered. In all 3, I believe, or maybe 2 of them, and it was like, you know, an underwhelming game. And people talked about, how, maybe once you get to the actual sort of tournament, it should just be the sort of nations that are more established. And then Sri Lanka, 20 years later, go on and win the World Cup. So in the interest of cricket, and you know what, like, even beyond that, let's be real, like, this has been, granted, there's been some rain and things like that, but in a lot of the games, I feel like some of the associate nations have put on really good fights, right? Like, it's not been as easy, and we'll see one of those games coming up, actually, a dear neighbor of ours, in fact, give Bhargav's South Africa a bit of a run for their money. But before that, like, quickly, let's touch upon the Papua New Guinea-Afghanistan game. This was Afghanistan sitting on top of the table. They put some distance between them and the rest of the pack. Pretty easy game for them in the end. Papua New Guinea bowled out for 95, but they did play almost all the overs, so credit to them for doing that. But Afghanistan chased that down in 15 overs. So what, Minnow Nation a couple of years ago,
now they're truly well within, the midst. They're in the midst of doing something special. I mean, we saw it in the ODI World Cup as well. They beat Pakistan, they beat England, and they beat Sri Lanka. And for those of you, I mean, Australia obviously won the World Cup, but they were this close to losing to Afghanistan. We saw almost special ODI knocks of our lifetime. What Glenn Maxwell did virtually on one leg. I don't think he's done well ever since, by the way. But Afghanistan were that close to beating them. And then this tournament, they just destroyed New Zealand first game, and they're doing the job against the teams that they're actually expected to beat, right? So, I mean, I think it's a remarkable, sort of consistency that they've established. A lot of credit needs to go to, I think I mentioned this on the last episode as well, but it cannot be understated. Credit that needs to go to Jonathan Trott, stepped into a really sort of foreign environment. He's talked about it in interviews as well. I mean, he's heard stories and he's faced situations that he never thought he'd see in his life. And he's really used, and he's really spoken to the guys and really gotten to understand their past and, their roots and what makes them tick. And, he's really got them performing on the international stage. So big credit to him. And also, the appointment of Dwayne Bravo as a T20 specialist coach has also got them bowling really well this tournament. So long may this success story continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the Afghanistan game is definitely not one that I'm super confident of going into the Super 8s. It's definitely going to be a tricky game. So, yeah, it's amazing how far they've come in not that many years as well. If you compare them to, like, say, Bangladesh, right? Bangladesh should be a little further along.
Yeah, true that.
Anyway, so going on to, this was an important game for Pakistan. It was United States, Ireland, and we had, the talk of the town this week, rain, come in, and
played spoils sport again.
The match was abandoned without a ball bowled. Pakistan were out of the World Cup because of this result. Somewhat unfortunate, somewhat comical. It's a bit of both.
That was purely for the audience, by the way. We know how we feel.
Yeah. No, but it's like not like this.
It's bittersweet.
For me, it's like I want to see Pakistan drop the ball. It's like not like this. Like now they'll be like, okay, we had one bad game and then we lost to maybe one of the best teams, in the game.
Pakistan dropped the ball. And that's such a nice ring to it.
It's only because it's so true.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Pakistan crossed out of the tournament at this point. Commiserations for sure. Somewhat not fully intended or meant, but sorry. Anyway, so South Africa, Nepal. This again was a display of how an associate nation could actually give Bhargav a heart attack in a way. Do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, sure. South Africa, what are you doing? Get your act together. Like, this is one of those instances where, spoiler alert, South Africa won the match and they finished the group 4 wins out of 4, but it almost feels like on any other day, they could have been 1 win and 3 losses. That's how close their wins have been. And I suppose you can't criticize the team if they win a lot of close games because that does wonders for your confidence. But these are teams they should be knocking off. Let's be real.
Yeah.
So, anyway, to get into the match specifics, they started off, they batted first, and in 20 overs, they hit 158 for 7. Definitely not what we thought they'd hit. You're probably expecting the high, maybe 170, 180 odd target and, to effectively put it out of Nepal's reach. But Nepal would have been licking their lips. They would have been saying, yeah, South Africa has a good bowling effort, but 115 is anything but daunting at this point. And so, as it turns out, Nepal started off their innings. Their opener the opener Asif Sheikh played really well. He hit 42, and he got some good support in the middle order from Anil Kumar Saw, who hit 27. The rest of them around them kind of failed to really get going, but I think it was Asif, Sheikh and Anil Kumar Sai who really gave them a chance, and it looked fairly comfortable at one point, right? I must
Very
add.
comfortable.
Yeah, it did.
It was less than run a ball,
It
right?
was less than run a ball, and at that point you're saying, surely you take home your advantage. But then Tabriz Shamsi comes into the attack and he kind of wreaks havoc, and wickets at regular intervals of time really set Nepal backward in their pursuit of the chase. But still, this was. It was not a foregone conclusion even, come the end of the match, right? I think it got to a point where the last over they needed, what was it? How many runs?
It was 10 of 4, I think.
Yeah, it was something around 10 of 4. I just remember the batsman on strike was Gulshan Jha. He kind of faced most of that last over. He sides a 4 through, cover. And it got to a point where they needed 2 of 3. I remember that. And so there were 2 balls where he was beaten. And then the penultimate ball, he gets beaten. And by the way, the bowler was, what's his name? Bartman.
Oh, right.
Yeah, was it Bartman? Yeah, Bartman. Bartman was the bowler, so he bowls a short ball. This guy Gulshan kind of goes for an uppercut, misses. He starts running because obviously at this point, at least tie the scores and give yourself a fighter's chance in the super over. But then the weirdest thing happens. So Quinton de Kock throws the ball, and it's coming back to the bowler. And then it hits Gulshan Jha on the back. But at that moment in time, instead of being startled, you need to ensure that you complete the run. If there are complaints about potential obstruction of the field, that will take care of itself. But for whatever reason, it hit him on the back and Gulshan Jha stops. And that split sort of second, really, it felt like a split second. That distraction was all Henrik Klaasen needed. He was fielding right next to, kind of the pitch. He takes the ball, underarms it onto the stumps, and believe it or not, catches Gulshan Jha maybe a foot short or a couple of inches, maybe a foot short, couple of inches maybe, and it's just wild. It wasn't pandemonium, like at least as far as the celebrations were concerned from South Africa, because it was a game that they were expected to win.
They scraped through.
But the fact that they were able to scrape through, and it was absolute heartbreak for Nepal. This would have.
Yeah.
I would probably say this would have been the biggest upset of all time.
Yeah.
Like Nepal have never played at this level. In South Africa, yes, we've gotten accustomed to them, pulling losses out of, of potential wins over the years, but they're still one of the best nations out there as far as, results are concerned. And so this was their opportunity. This was Nepal's opportunity, and to fall agonizingly short really hurts.
Astonishing series of events. It's like you see even the South African players after QDK misses the stumps, they a lot of them have their hands on their head because they think the match is going to a super over or whatever, and it's actually commendable that Klaasen had the presence of mind to even post that, hit the stumps. But like you said, it's definitely the inexperience that showed. The youngster just had to complete the run. Can't imagine what was going through his head at that point, but it must be heartbreaking.
You feel really bad because it's not going to be that close, regardless of who you support. It's one of those where you're like, okay, this would have been big for the game too.
It's going to be a rough couple of nights for the youngster, but I think
he'll come out of it. He'll come out of it stronger.
Nepal they have this to take away from the tournament, which I think is
a fair bit close. But you also need to give South Africa a little credit with that. They finished the group on top. That's the South African fan in me, but they did the job, I suppose. So you got to give them a little credit. So they qualified top of the group and Super 8s.
Yeah, they squeezed in there. They managed. But good to have South Africa there. I'm sure that they're going to pick up on their form. We'll see. Or BG Professor could also need some therapy.
Absolutely. They've given me too much heartbreak over the years.
Another team that tends to give a lot of their fans heartbreak was New Zealand, who was playing Uganda, and it's funnily enough, there were a lot of huge victories, but New Zealand's we're talking Australia, Namibia, and England, Oman, crushing defeats on unfortunately for teams that are younger in their cricketing journey, right? And New Zealand playing Uganda, did possibly as well as they could have bowled them out for 40, and I ended up chasing it in 5.2 overs. But I haven't heard much noise about this game. No one has talked about it.
I think they know. That the real opportunity was the West Indies game, because I think you get to a point where the first game you can always be a bit rusty, and Afghanistan were really good on the night. But I think the West Indies game probably stings.
Yeah.
Because, they've had 2 bad games and that's it. There's very little room for error. So, unfortunate, but nothing really to celebrate, I suppose. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, after this, there were a couple of games. Actually, very important day. Not for the India-Canada game. India-Canada game was just for the fans traveling to Fort Lauderdale or Miami. To watch, see their heroes, but it was washed out. This was another game that was washed out without a ball being bowled. But it was a huge day because both the games that England relied on in order for their qualification, both were happening the same day. England were playing their game first against Namibia, and they had to do a job, which they did pretty well.
Yeah, but before that, I will add the rain almost did.
The rain, they had to sweat. They had to sweat for a little while with the weather. In fact, I was actually pretty surprised that it happened. I was almost sure. This is like the minimum amount of overs,
yes,
right? Possible.
Me too. Yeah.
But great showing from England in that game. Lots of good knocks. Harry Brook, I believe, played a pretty good knock. Led the charge, got them to 122 for 5 in 10 overs. Great score, really, against Namibia. And Namibia put a pretty decent fight, but I guess you kind of knew there's always get into that. Yeah, it was a little too high, and England did what they needed to. So far, I think they've had a little bit of bad luck with the game against Scotland being washed out. Although, maybe that's being harsh on Scotland to a certain extent. So that left England in second place with the Australia-Scotland game to come. And if Scotland won that game,
England
would get knocked out, and there was a lot of talk and a little bit of, I would say, I would have to think that it's all said in jest, but about Australia playing a little slowly initially when, the net run rate was possibly a factor. But now I think by the time this game came around, net run rate wasn't a factor, right? England had that huge win, great net run rate. But Scotland, Australia, do you want to...
Yeah, sure. One thing I will say though, and this is my opinion, I actually think that shouldn't be looked down upon. The fact that teams strategically choose to play a specific way to knock out a prospective rival who's probably stronger, or not stronger than that team, but strong and has the potential to derail your opponent, derail their opponents. So what I mean to say is, I wouldn't have criticized Australia if they chose to field a weak team, given that they'd already qualified. I don't know why that's looked down upon. Sure, I think at the end of the day, the game is strategic, and you need to give yourself the best chance to win a tournament. Sure, a lot of people might say, but you chose to do it the wrong way, or you didn't play the best available opposition. But at the end of the day, you want to maximize your chances, right? I think no one's going to give you extra brownie points. There's no extra trophy you get for going through the hardest path to win the title. So I believe, although it was all done in good humor, I do think there was a possibility that we actually... there is a possibility that we see this kind of play out in the future.
I have to hard disagree, not with the fact that it could happen, but with the sort of intention to do it. I'm getting vibes from Jordan and the Bulls. When they were trying to, I think this is 84, 85, when they were trying to stay out of the playoffs in order to get a better draft pick. And he's like, that's just not how I played the game.
That's Michael Jordan. Fine, I respect that. The guy clearly did well for himself.
This is Australia.
True, but
I feel like it would be un-Australian. I don't think India would ever do it, but it's un-Australian. They should want England to come and whoop their asses, but I see what you're saying. It makes sense. I'd be very shocked to see a team do it. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm just what I want to say is I don't mind it, and it's not out of the realm of possibility of it happening, especially because I think it's all about strategy. And yeah, sure, like people don't do it because it's not necessarily in the spirit of the game. I get that. First and foremost, I get that 100%. But I'm saying I wouldn't have criticized them if they chose to do that. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it's not outside of the rules, so anything that's not outside of the rules.
Yeah.
Like I have had my mindset about man carding shift a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's nothing wrong with man carding actually.
Yeah.
My perspective on man carding changed a little bit because I think it's a slightly different scenario though, because the batsman is trying to get a competitive advantage, right? It's a competitive advantage to like get that start from the crease. But the way it's similar, I think, is the spirit of the game argument, right? It's like if it's within the rules, I don't think anyone can. It's a subjective.
Australia's trying to get a competitive advantage playing a theoretically weaker team.
Yeah, I mean,
potential.
this is the team that ran Bairstow out when he was just trying.
I'm not advocating. I'm not saying Australia absolute saints, but you get the drill.
But actually, this is a good game, right? This is a very interesting game, and in fact, even with Australia not trying to do that, Scotland actually put on an extremely good fight. And maybe I'll take the Scotland innings.
Sure.
And it was actually brilliant knocks. Ashton Agar came into the squad for this one, and so I think in a way, like they did use this as a tinker with the formula a little bit. Australia, but didn't particularly play a weak side. Can't be said that they played a weak side. But George, so he took out Michael Jones, who I'm very familiar with as a Scotland cricket fan. But George Munsey and Brandon McMullen played absolutely phenomenally. Yeah, some scintillating stroke play from both of them, George Munsey and Brandon McMullen. Not Baz.
Not Baz. Not Craig McMillan either.
Not Craig McMillan either. But yeah, it was absolutely amazing. Like, hoists over the offside, the leg side, brilliant straight batted strokes. And Scotland actually looks like a really good setup, right? Like they've been playing quite phenomenally, even in the game that was washed out against England. If you were to just say, it was unfortunate that England dropped points, that doesn't exactly tell the whole story, right? 90 in 10 overs before it was washed out. The Scotland matters. So great job from them. And it was carried through by Richie Berrington, who also is the captain. Some great lusty blows at the end. They did slow down. The last 11 weren't as explosive as the first 9, I believe. In 9 overs, they were about 90 or so. Or
their last 6 overs, I believe they only hit about 45 runs, which kind of actually slowed them down, but still very, very impressive total of 180 for 5 in their 20 overs against an Australian attack that granted was missing Hazelwood and Cummins, but was still extremely competent. And so then, Australia started their chase. They lost Warner early and they lost Mitchell Marsh early as well to some pretty good bowling. And Glenn Maxwell was bowled by an absolute beauty. Absolute Jaffa by Mark Watt. This guy is a very promising left-arm spinner who's actually gotten better over time. There was actually an interview which our Ashwin did recently with Prasanna on his YouTube channel, and he kind of shares a couple of anecdotes about how Mark Watt approached him in Dubai a couple of years ago and asked him about how he remembers, kind of the intricacies or, with respect to the details of bowling. And then Ashwin said, he maintains a number of diaries and he revisits those notes. So Mark Watt actually has a paper which he's been writing notes on because he doesn't trust his memory.
That sounds like the most Ashwin thing I've ever heard. It sounds like the most Ashwin thing because I think he probably fits the book somehow into his pants.
Absolutely. But I thought that was a funny anecdote, but it also shows, Mark Watt's, the willingness to improve, right? And, to talk to one of the best in Ashwin. So, he gets the wicket of Maxwell and then, Stoinis enters the fray. And
I think at that point, they needed like about 80, 89 or 80 something from 39 balls.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking 13 and over kind of required runs.
So Scotland definitely were within a shout there. And, but, then Stoinis and Head kind of take over and Stoinis, goes, big guns and really, gets 59 off 29 and effectively kind of seals the match from Australia's perspective. Travis Head as well, extremely commendable knock at the top of the order, but it was Stoinis who really, gave the innings the much needed impetus. 59 off 29.
Head, I think, went almost a run ball to a 50 and then turned on the NOS. Turned on the nitrous oxide towards the end. Oh God, I was like, I think he hit 3 consecutive balls for 6. Funny thing, I forgot to mention also in the Australian innings, they were weirdly poor with the ball. With the fielding.
6 drop catches.
6 drop catches, the most in any T20 World Cup game, I believe.
Remarkable stuff. You wouldn't expect that of that team, the team that really sets the bar that high.
I was like, wait, is that Pakistan? Oh, shit.
cut.
But 3 consecutive drops also. I mean, tough catches, but
incredible for a team that sets the bar that high. But I think Stoinis really ensured that this match was only going one way, and Tim David applies the finishing touches in the end. It's a mammoth 6 that effectively seals Scotland's fate, and it's sad.
One drop at the end.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, the drop, but I think it was kind of
it was done.
It was done by that point. Really sad, sad to see Scotland kind of exit the tournament in that fashion, because they were really competitive. Even the match against England, which got rained out, I think they were 90 for 1 in 10 overs, and so they were really setting themselves up for success. And funny enough, Scotland and Ireland tend to kind of elevate their game against England, particularly, right? So you never know how that would have panned out. So Scotland, can exit the tournament with their heads held high. But having said that, it's Australia that progresses as number 1 from that group, and England go through as number 2. And where does that leave us?
That leaves us with all groups, all but decided. I believe the open group was
the group with
South Africa and Bangladesh. New Zealand is not in that group, if we decide to keep that bit in. But I think that's also almost a done deal, because the team that is third in that group is Netherlands, who has a really poor net run rate. So it's going to be hard for them to sort of flip that around. So effectively, most likely it's going to be Bangladesh that is in the group with India, Australia, Afghanistan and Bangladesh. Not the worst spread of teams. As an Indian fan,
you're actually looking at that and
I didn't know I had to specify that. But the other group is South Africa, England, West Indies and
the USA.
The US of A. I hope it's the US and England out of.
Oh, jeez. Why is he always playing spoiler? But okay, I'm not going to do what I want. Let's see what we actually think is going to happen, and let's see how accurate we are.
Okay.
So I will let you go first. Group 1, which is the India group. Who makes it? 1 and 2.
I mean, I think it's somewhat obvious, but I expect Afghanistan to scare us a little bit. Scare someone. Maybe this time they actually go ahead and beat Australia, take both of Maxwell's legs off. So, there's no hope for any revival there. But I think you'd have to go, if you're a betting guy, you'd have to go with India and Australia there. In the other group, considering South Africa's bad form and considering their general, sort of performance in the latter ends of tournaments, I can't see myself pick them. I would have to say that West Indies, especially this tournament, 2-time champions, with a team that's so well suited, I would have to, sort of pick West Indies as one of my teams. I said, hope the US goes through and stuff, but that's definitely a twist that I would like to see, and hopefully we play them in the semifinals or whatever. But I don't see the US getting out of that group, to be honest. It would have to be, what's the other team? West Indies. England. I think England, had a rough, unlucky sort of initial game with Scotland. They lost to Australia, which, there's nothing to be ashamed of, I guess, except for them. They probably should be ashamed, mostly because the Aussies will definitely rub that in. But I think it's going to be West Indies and England coming out of that.
That's good. Yeah. I think Afghanistan and Bangladesh probably go through. No, I think India, Australia. I don't know where it's going. India and Australia definitely. I just think Afghanistan potential to spring a surprise there. Maybe nip one game out of the two big ones, but I still think that pedigree of being in those final stages and having the know-how will really carry India and Australia through. Bangladesh, unfortunately, I think will finish last in that group. So commiserations, Bangladesh fans. And the other group, it's a tricky one because you have three very good teams on paper. And I really want South Africa to go through, but I do think it will surprise. But I do think England get out of that group as 1 and West Indies go through as 2. So South Africa.
Oh man, pick your team.
No, I'm always gonna go with
He wants to be right.
I want to be right.
Doesn't go with his heart.
I'm a very rational person, guys.
Checks out with the doctorate and everything.
Absolutely. So South Africa 3 and America.
So I guess no one's gonna get to say I told you so here, but I guess if you do happen to decide to engage, put in who you think is gonna be in the semi-finals. It is gonna be such an exciting tournament. It already has been, I guess that's kind of all that there is from us, unless you had a...
Nope, that is it. I'm looking forward to, the group stages, just happened. Shocker. I'm looking forward to the Super 8s. Let's see how that pans out. I hope rain doesn't play spoilsport for one. I'm done with rain, and hopefully, rain doesn't play spoilsport in that sense, and may the best team win.
Absolutely. With that said, take care, you guys. Stay safe out there. Gear yourselves up for all the action. And you know where to catch us. We'll see you next week. Peace.